Americans have read it. What about Europe? Makes you go thank goodness we don't have that here. Canadian here. Something that I never understood was that shops and other places just get closed so darn early. Like you are sitting there reading in the light of day and the owner comes and says it is closed. Some days everything is either closed or will close super early for no apparent reason. In America, things stay open till hell freezes over. I'm British, and this used to bother me. I'm quite nocturnal, and do often wish everything was open all night. But I changed my mind when I thought about how, if everything is open super late, some poor sucker is working those awful hours, and as someone who used to work pretty shit hours, I don't really mind shops and stuff closing earlier, knowing that their staff have more sociable working hours. It's happening too often now, with this new crazy work ethic where even office jobs are no longer 9 to 5, but instead 8 to 8. Working is taking over living. It's become an unhealthy norm to work yourself to death, and employers are taking advantage of this instead of paying a livable wage. Things closing really early. I was at a coffee shop doing homework when studying abroad. By around 3 they came up to me and kicked me out, since they were about to close. In the US, coffee shops are often open pretty late for people to study, so that was weird go me. Other than that, I think living in Europe would be wonderful. Canadian here. From my few trips to Europe, only France and Greece, I'm happy that we don't have the high smoker/non-smoker ratio, the sheer density of population in some places, the water scarcity, so many tourists. I know tourism is good for national economy, but I'd go crazy if I couldn't access my favorite spots because there are always tourists in the way. That warm of a weather. How hard it is to get meals outside of mealtime. In America, regardless of what hour of the day it is, you can be reasonably sure of finding some kind of restaurant open. Even at 2 AM you can find a Denny's or something. Most restaurants, outside of really fancy places, don't close down between meal times, so you can go in at any time during operating hours to get food. Compare that to places where all the restaurants are only open during mealtime hours, and you're out of fucking luck if you get hungry at 10 in the morning. Disclaimer, the last time I left the USA was in the 90s and things may be different now, but that is what frustrated me about my trip. Paying for public restrooms. Honestly, I wonder how the elderly manage being out and about. My grandparents and stepmother pee about every 30 minutes, sometimes more, and it would cost a small fortune while traveling as most restrooms I saw were at least €2, sometimes €5 to use. Edit. This was December 2016. I was in primarily Germany and Belgium, and my BlaBlaCar host told me the UK was similar. Germany's train stations consistently smelled of stale pee, and I suspect this was a consequence of having to pay to use the restroom. A clean restroom is nice, but if the result of requiring payment is people just peeing in open public spaces, I also don't think the trade-off is worth it. The lack of public lands and wilderness areas. The general lack of wildlife. The public holds ownership of 640 million acres of incredible landscapes, and all wildlife is publicly owned, managed in trust by different agencies. I can plant my feet anywhere on that ground and feel completely free. It is as much mine as anyone else's. I've spent a lot of time in Europe, including 2 18-month stints in Budapest and Rotterdam. I love a lot of the culture, the architecture, and history. I fully plan to return to visit. I'm unable to live somewhere long term, where I can't take to the wilderness and roam free whenever I want. It might be the most beautiful thing about the United States. Edit. Thanks for the gold and the contributing comments. This isn't an attack on Europeans, or some kind of blame game. This is an incredibly important subject. It deserves a nuanced conversation, not social media's forte. I encourage you to do your own exploring and research. See what's worked and what hasn't. The truth is we got lucky early on. We had a president and large group of outdoors people who recognized that we were about to effectively eliminate wild places during the westward expansion and did something about it. They assigned value to these places before it was too late and managed to enshrine it as a chief American value. European peoples, my ancestors among them, had a lot more time to settle and resettle most of the continent before Western civilization had the luxury to start thinking ahead. There are also great European organizations working to increase, restore, and improve what remains in the wilderness realm. It's a totally different experience from the US right now. As a Brit now living in the US for the last 6.5 years, there are many things I do not miss about home, including an obvious one, but yes, the population density, just generally feeling overcrowded all the time. Too many people smoking in public, and carelessly around young children. Crazy price of gas/petrol. Rain year round. I mean it rains a bit here too but nowhere near as much. Getting dark at 3:30 PM in winter. Litter everywhere and just general lack of care about surroundings. Gum and spit on pavements is especially disgusting. Lack of variety with ethnic restaurants. I know I'm somewhat spoiled for choice in my area, but back home it was Indian, Chinese or Nandos. If you didn't want a kebab or fish and chips. There's probably more but that'll do for now. So everyone's saying pay restrooms, and yes, this is true. And for all the hell American public bathrooms get for the door gaps, can I just say, after living and traveling in Europe for 6 years, the toilets were generally the biggest thank fuck I'm done with them. Some of them were fine. But there was the Eastern toilets, that were a target in the ground, and then in places like the Netherlands where I live the toilets with the poop shelf were real popular, and those were weird in an entirely different way. And while the Brit water closets weren't weird, they did piece together a huge life realization for young me. With a WC, you pull once to flush a pee and twice to flush solids. Number 1 and number 2. Explain teenage me's head explodes. Europeans who absolutely shit all over Americans in threads, like what about the US, is weird to Europeans, but can't take it when Americans throw in their 2 cents. I'm an American who has been to 14 countries in Europe, many of them more than once, because I genuinely love to travel over there, and to be honest, I don't have much to complain about. I haven't really encountered much rudeness, because I expect more of a cold approach from Europeans as a general personality trait, so it doesn't bother me. Someone on the metro in Rome tried to finger me once. That kind of sucked, but I still returned a year later, because I realized that can happen anywhere. I think the most off-putting thing to happen to me was in Paris last year, when I had to defend a friend who was being bothered by someone trying to sell her something on Champs-Élysées near the Eiffel Tower. I speak French, and told him to leave her alone. He proceeded to scream in my face and attempt to shine a laser pointer in my eyes for the next 30 minutes. That really sucked. Viewing from the Trocadero area seems to be a bit more pleasant. All in all, I've had wonderful times in Europe, but it seems as though many Europeans grow more hostile towards Americans as each day passes, so I probably won't return for a while, and will instead look into visiting more of South America in the future. If Americans are so dumb and suck so much, I as a traveler will simply go elsewhere. The toilets in Europe are unreal. In the US, basically every public toilet is one of a few models that either have a little flush lever or are motion sensing. They all have seats and are very generous with the water. In Europe, I've been in a McDonald's in Metz that the toilet was just a metal bowl with no seat. You just have to hover. I've seen several other toilets like that. Plus you usually have to pay to go to the bathroom. All the Dutch train stations charge you, and it's usually like 0.70 and they give you a coupon for 0.50 for in-store credit. There was one in Lucerne that cost like €1.70. I'm pretty sure if you tried to charge someone to use the bathroom in America you would get sued or shot. Not an American, but lived in America for 30 plus years and just moved to Europe. I'm not European either. I like it a lot here but the clothes dryers that take 2 to 3 hours and still doesn't dry your clothes. Also they can't handle large things like blankets. Want to wash more than 2 bath towels? Not in Europe. That will take you multiple loads, 2.5 hours to wash and 2.5 hours to dry. The fact that smokers smoke directly by building doors and you have to walk through a plume of smoke every time you come in and out, and the fact that cigarette butts are not seen as litter and are everywhere. People here are incredibly woke on the environment and health, but completely ignore this particular issue. As others have mentioned, paying for tap water, or the fact that one cannot get it, even though my city has perfectly drinkable tap water. Also, the body odor problem is real. I lived in Greece half the year for about 10 years. Some things I do not miss in order of most annoying to me. Trash, so much trash everywhere, and plenty of trash cans, but weren't being used, and cigarette butts in the sand etc. Driving so stressful, weird shop hours, only being able to shop certain days in the afternoon, so of course the parking was insane on those days, no queuing, so against how I was raised, lol. So hard to push past people to pay, but you have to do it. I still go every year for a few weeks and I love Greece, just some things I never got used to.